Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar series that we're holding in light of the COVID situation. As those of you who know that have been following us, we have moved all of our in-person events to webinars, and this is the first in the series of our webinars with the UN Global Compact Network UAE. Before I start, I'm Yasmin Awari, Executive Director of the Pearl Initiative, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar on corporate leadership in times of crisis. As I mentioned, it's the first in a series that we are holding in collaboration with the Global Compact Network UAE and the World Green Economy Organization. Before I delve into the theme for today's webinar, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Pearl Initiative and our collaborating partners with us today: Chalhoub Group, the UN Resident Coordinator Office, the Global Compact Network UAE, and the World Green Economy Organization. For those of you who don't know about Pearl Initiative, you'll already know that we were developed in cooperation with the United Nations Office of Partnerships and were launched in September 2010 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Pearl Initiative is the region's leading and only independent non-profit organization committed to support the private sector to proactively take a lead in adopting higher standards of corporate governance and implementing improved standards of accountability and transparency in order to enhance business competitiveness and value creation. With its growing network of partner companies, the Pearl Initiative is committed towards driving collective action, exhibiting decisive leadership and sharing of knowledge and experience to positively influence regional businesses and student communities. As I mentioned, Chalhoub Group are participating today. Mr. Patrick Chalhoub, CEO, is one of our speakers. For those of you that aren't familiar with Chalhoub Group, they are one of the founding partners of the Pearl Initiative. And the Chalhoub Group is a leading partner for luxury across the Middle East since 1955. As an expert in retail, distribution and marketing services based in Dubai, the group is a major player in the beauty, fashion and gift sector region. By blending its Middle East expertise and intimate knowledge of luxury, the group is building brands in the region by offering service excellence to all its partners and a unique experience to its customers. The group is moving fast from a traditional distributor and retailer to a hybrid retailer, bringing luxury experiences to the fingertips of customers everywhere. By being committed to implementing further sustainable practices into their business, the Chalhoub Group is a participant of the United Nations Global Compact, signatory of the Women's Empowerment Principles, and was awarded its 7th CSR label from the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. We are very privileged to have Patrick Chalhoub, our board member, as well as a board member on both the UN Global Compact board and in the UAE local network here with us today. Thank you, Patrick. I mentioned the UN Resident Coordinator is also here today. The system encompasses all organizations of the United Nations system dealing with operational activities for development, regardless of their formal presence in a specific company. The RC system aims to bring together the different UN agencies to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of programmatic engagement at the country level. The UN Resident Coordinator for every country is the senior-most UN official in the country, also representing the UN Secretary General. We are honored to welcome Dr Dena Assaf, the UN Resident Coordinator for the UAE, to our discussion today. Again, Dr. Dena, thank you so much for joining us today and giving up the time from your busy schedule. Another collaborator is the Global Compact Network UAE, hosted by the World Green Economy Organization. It aims to mobilize the UAE's private sector to align both the UN Global Compact's 10 principles and the SDGs through various programs, task forces, and activities in relation to key priority areas defined. Facilitating the collaboration and communication between businesses and non-businesses, the local network looks to provide a platform for dialogue to occur. The World Green Economy Organization is a multi-stakeholder organization consisting of platform members from cities, public sector authorities, private and financial sector companies, academic institutions, and youth programs, all of which are engaged in green economy-related practices, activities, and issues. World Green Economy seeks to promote the widespread acceptance and increased importance of green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Those are our intros done. Let's introduce the webinar subject today itself. As you know, business leaders today find themselves caught between the pull to act swiftly and the need to make calculated decisions that ensure the sustainability of their businesses. Striking a balance between the two is a challenge, and this webinar will shed more light on the strategies through which this can be achieved, all in keeping a focus on the UN Global Compact 10 principles and the Sustainable Development Goals. In a conversation with Patrick Chalhoub, Dr Dena Assaf will initiate the webinar with an overview of the socio-economic challenges and opportunities brought about by the global pandemic of COVID-19. She will also highlight how the private sector can support the UN's response to the global pandemic. Dr. Dena will then turn to Patrick Chalhoub with questions on how Chalhoub Group has responded to the global crisis, how this response addresses the needs of the group stakeholders, and how it links to their core business values. Patrick Chalhoub will also touch upon the attributes of a successful business leader during a crisis and his reflections on what businesses will look like in the aftermath of COVID-19. As with all our webinars, we like them to be as interactive as possible, and we invite you to ask any questions you may have pertaining to the topic during the session using the platform's Q&A tool. We'll forward your questions to Dr. Dena Assaf and Patrick Chalhoub, and we'll use the last 15 minutes of the session to answer those directly. So once again, thank you for joining, and I'll hand over now to Dr. Dena and Patrick Chalhoub. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, and I want to thank you very much for putting this initiative together, to thank you and the Pearl Initiative, and also right up front to thank Patrick for his time. I know we're all very caught up in many things these days. So I just want to start with a very brief introduction on my part, and then I look forward to having a conversation with Patrick. We'll go back and forth and see where the conversation takes us. Are you good with that, Patrick?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dena. Thank you, Yasmin.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, from the United Nations point of view, just to give an overall overview, from the United Nations point of view, of course, this is something not just that the UN sees, but the globe sees, that this pandemic has had an impact globally that goes beyond anything we have foreseen. The United Nations soon, right after the declaration of the pandemic, realized that this was not a normal situation that we were entering. And the Secretary General commissioned a global report, which you can find online, and we'll share the links at a later date, which addresses the global impact of COVID on the socio-economic situations in countries around the world. And a variety of issues came to forefront. Additionally, the United Nations then looked to see how to operationalize these findings to ensure that the United Nations could support countries in identifying in a proactive manner the impact of the pandemic and address the resilience in their countries to ensure that things move in a positive manner as best as possible post the pandemic and of course during the pandemic. There are 5 key areas that the United Nations is looking to focus their support currently, and those relate to health services and systems, and it's quite clear that of course without strong health systems we will not be able to manage now or in the future. Also issues around social protection and basic services to ensure that as we see across the planet, and this is one of the things we'll be talking about with Patrick, is the issues of employment and how that's been affecting people around the world. And therefore then the economic response and recovery countries need to go through, the macroeconomic response and multilateral collaboration that is needed, because we can't do this alone country by country, we have to come together. And also issues around social cohesion and community resilience. And I think the word resilience, Patrick, will be a word that we'll be talking about a lot. To be able to operationalize the analysis that we've done as the United Nations, we've launched 3 appeals at a global level so that there's a coordinated approach and also a prioritization of where support is needed. And for your information, and you can get more details in many places, we have a response and recovery fund, which is for the humanitarian cases around the world. 63 countries of the most vulnerable countries were identified to see how the UN can ensure that they're getting the support they're needed. And currently, this humanitarian response plan is at $6.7 billion and counting. And this is considered a realistic number for the humanitarian response. And there's also a response and recovery fund of about $2 billion to deal with socioeconomic issues. And another one from WHO, the World Health Organization, to address health systems at approximately 1.7 billion. And currently it's at a gap of 1.3 billion. And this is to put together health systems in countries up till the year 2029, because we know this is not a short-term issue. The UN Global Compact, who's a partner in this webinar as well, is calling on companies to use the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, and we'll be talking about that today, to ensure that companies are bringing in these key principles, and now more than ever, these principles bear witness. These include issues under human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. So we'll be talking more about these things, and as the UN, we're looking to see how to support countries around the world in ensuring that they can be responsive to this pandemic currently, as well as post the pandemic. And I'm very happy to have Patrick Chalhoub with us today. As he was introduced, the CEO of the Chalhoub Group. Also very important to note is that they work in 14 countries, right? You're in 14
Absolutely.
countries, and what I have here is that you have over 12,000 employees. So the first question I would like to ask as part of our conversation is, what did you do as a response to this situation? How are you managing? Over to you.
Obviously, it's quite unseen before. Our group have 65 years old, and we have gone through different phases and different crises. The one we have seen now was absolutely unexpected. And again, one of the learning is expect the unexpected. At the beginning of this crisis, the most important we felt was to be very authentic, very human, very transparent into the way we are doing the things and the effect and the impact it could have empathy with our teams, and be extremely inclusive. And I must recognize that I'm really humbled and thankful to all our teams on the way they have reacted, and I could have never imagined that we could react so quickly with such an agility when we have a boat of 12,000 people throughout 14 countries, etc. I think that our ability to react and to adapt as a human being, our resilience to any event, is much stronger than what we could imagine. Now, to come back again to your question in concrete terms, what have we done? We have tried to stay extremely connected with our teams at a time where we were all feeling totally insecure. So it was very important that we get engaged with our teams, we get engaged and connected with our customers throughout all this period and up till now. Obviously, our first priority was health and safety of everyone. And I think by abiding with all the government measures, going even the extra miles, all the safety measures, etc., we have tried to give comfort and security for all our teams. We definitely want the extra miles because we felt that in terms of support, we needed to take care also of not only the health and the safety of our people, but also their mental health, their physical health, and again, trying to give them all the necessary advice, recommendation, obviously trying to work totally offline instead of working online. What we did, we split ourselves in 10 commando teams, some I would say more defensive and some more into the offensive part of it, in order to see not only how we could take care of our people and how are we going to take care of the precautionary measures, but how can we again make sure that we protect our group, and how can we be also valuable for our community, globally for our community at the time where we need to be engaged with the community, so particularly with our customers, but more generally with our community. And then it went back to more the business part of it. How are we going to deal with the financial stress of having our 700 retail stores closed and no revenue? Also, we have to take care of our expenses. How are we going to deal with our different partners, service providers, with the government, but also enhance, I would say, what was working. So we had an e-commerce drive, which is probably 5-7% of our business. So how can we make it much more meaningful? We have been able to multiply our sales by 6, but this is thanks to the engagement of our employees and our customers, whom we discover are absolutely multitask about it. So a lot of measure, but also, and again, when after we have managed the first effect of the crisis, thinking about tomorrow and after tomorrow. How long will this pandemic last? How deep it will go? And what will happen after the 18 next months? But then after the 18 next months, and how can we be again relevant to our customers, but also making sure that we safeguard our employees, their future, their employment, and make it happen for the future. So humbled by everyone work.
Yeah. So I mean, you referenced some very important words in there: resilience, compassion, flexibility, innovation, and I think there's many other words that were very important. But so what I wanted to ask as a follow-up, how did you find the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact assisting your framework of your core values and what you do as a business? Did that support you, the Global Compact 10 principles?
I would say the things which support us is definitely the fact that we have a strong purpose and strong values within our group, and our values are very much in line with the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, and we have totally put them within our strategy and our philosophy of doing work. So obviously, when we deal with our people, with there is all the labor laws and all the evolution which has happened, and where we are absolutely respectful. But again, here we are dealing with people, with humans, so we have to be fair, we have to be considerate, we have to have this empathy, and all of this is embedded into the 10 principles and in the value of our group. Obviously, we have to be considerate of doing the things totally within the framework of the different laws and government into a very methodic ways. At the same time, we felt that our customers more than ever are really today much more engaged in things which counts, much more engaged in with companies or with brands which have a purpose and which are much more encompassed with the sustainability and the sustainability of our world and of our environment, which goes back again to the 10 principles and the fact that it is totally embedded in what we have been doing in all our strategy has given us really the extra edge which we would be looking for. So extremely valuable to have strong values and to be attached to the principles of the UN Global Compact.
So the framework of the 10 principles, and for those who are listening, if you don't know what those are, you can easily Google it, 10 principles, UN Global Compact, it'll pop up right on your screen. And I think we can see that these even though before the pandemic were relevant, have become even more relevant. And what I hear you also saying is that you took a human-centered approach. This is, would be my interpretation. And so how I would ask you as a next question, how did what you do also impact all your stakeholders? So you have your employees where you had a very human-centered approach, but you have other stakeholders that you're dealing with as well. So how did you deal with that?
First, when I speak about the employees, we are not a welfare organization. We are definitely, we have to protect our business interests. If we want to protect employment and our employees, we have to protect the group. In the way we have dealt first with our employees, which for me are the most important stakeholders, and then all the rest of it. There is this spirit of togetherness all together. And when it is all together, it means if there is a certain effort, if there is collaboration, we need to do it all together. So yes, as an organization, we did salary cuts, we have limited our salary cuts to 8% of the best paid employees, which have supported not only the organization, and some of them have taken 65% salary cut, some of them like myself 100% salary cut, but we have supported the most vulnerable and we have supported the organization. So in spite of those salary cuts, we have received word of thank you about it. So definitely we mainly try to respond into it in trying to be faithful to our employees, but at the same time very demanding from them. In other stakeholders, we definitely have our customers, and again, in a commercial organization, in private or public sector, it is the consumers, it's the population. This is what counts the most. So it was extremely important that at the same time that we were making a lot of financial efforts, we continue investing and asking our teams to invest, to connect, and to engage with our customers, to continue to delight them, to show them care and love, which was extremely important, and where we were paying back to what they have given, but also where we will be definitely paid back at better times, and we have seen a lot of gratitude. When it comes to other stakeholders, again, we are a privately family-owned company, but again, we have a strong governance. We have our board, we have our shareholders, which we need to satisfy. We are going to go through a tough financial time, so a lot of transparency into dealing with them, into showing all the different aspects and the way we are having the response, short-term, mid-term, long-term, and how, even if it means some financial support needed, including by financial institution, bankers, and our shareholders, it is meaningful to what we stand for and the return which will be doing it, and every time attached to what we stand for. What is our group, our organization doing, and for what? And finally, the last one is our community. And for me, we have always felt that we are taking quite a lot from the community, and we have to give back to the community. And this is the time where you show your engagement, as I mentioned it earlier, to the community in trying to make simple gesture, but which would be very meaningful for people into the healthcare and all the people taking care of impacted people by the virus, for taking care of our employees who are our heroes and who have, some of them have continued to work in our fulfillment centers or for the last mile or for deliveries. So quite a lot of engagement, them and their families, which were shown in order to be able to address the different needs. So financially not rewarding, but at least we have this appreciation and this feeling that we are doing good, and we'll get it back again and again.
Inshallah. And you stressed a very important point, which is the key to this webinar, which is you are a business. So, you know, your employees had to find different ways of working, or maybe even come up with ideas of how maybe to do things differently. Have you seen in your business that you're doing some things that you haven't done before and didn't even consider before this pandemic?
Absolutely. First, as I said, we had employees who were given certain tasks, and we give them such assignment, and we really felt that they were absolutely able to be multitask. We had a lot of them who have gone on e-learning, because we developed a lot of the e-learning in order that they develop, and who have been able to develop and to be useful in other parts of the organization. We had some of our senior leaders who went to the fulfillment center and have done very basic work, which was absolutely needed. We all started working from home, organizing meetings digitally and virtually in a much more efficient way that we have we have done ever before. A lot of innovative, creative ideas in order to be able to continue our activity in spite of having most of our stores which were closed. I mean, we have seen catalog of products being put on WhatsApp and some trying to delight our customer, even if there is no transaction which were being there. A lot of collaboration also with our different competitors and peers across sector and within our sector, collaboration which we had never seen before, because again, we are all in it. And we have some common challenges and issues where we needed this kind of collaboration. But also, I would say we have seen sometimes some people who were depressed, who needed some help and some support, some people who were under financial stress, including within our service provider and suppliers, some people who are under panic attack and who were doing probably not the most relevant things which we were expecting from them. And again, it's how we are able to deal with it and trying to bring them to us and go to them. But at some time, you have to say also enough is enough. I mean, you really need also to be determined and resolute in your choices and convinced. Again, not being a welfare organization, but trying to do it with a lot of common sense and a lot of humanity into the way we are doing it. But there is a lot of things which we have learned, and I'm sure that we can learn a lot from you and from the UN on different possible aspects. So an aspect of how, again, the UN could be more a catalyst for all the private sectors, and how can you help us more globally as private sectors to have a response. Again, we are grown up and we take our own decision, but it's true that we need certain catalysts, and sometimes we find it in government bodies, sometimes we find it in our association. But I think the UN is sitting in the right place to be a catalyst also for the private sectors in order to help us encompassing a response to this pandemic.
Thank you actually for that mention, because as I said in my introduction, of course, there's many more things that I could speak to, but we wanted to get to a variety of topics today. But I do want to highlight a few points based on what you've just said from the United Nations side. Of course, the UN does look to see how to share best practices across the planet. And like you said, we're very well positioned to support, because the UN is for everyone. It's not for anyone in specific. We are about including everyone, and there's a principle of leave no one behind, which is key to the UN's principles. The UN Global Compact, in fact, and I'm just going to hold this up right here, I don't know if it can be seen. Let's see, there we go. Has just released a business guide for the COVID-19 for the private sector, to just give an indication of where actually the private sector can also engage, whether through direct support, through as vendors to the efforts of the United Nations, as a partner, also to ensure that they support various advocacy. So that's also something that I think colleagues would be interested in seeing. But across the United Nations, the different agencies will be and are. The Secretary General has put on us a lot of pressure to ensure that we're responsive in supporting countries around the world. And here in the UAE, we look forward to working with you as well. I also wanted to mention, and thank you for mentioning the mental health issue. This is also a very important thing that we all need to pay attention to. The UN Secretary General also recently launched a report and had a video message on this last week. We'll also provide those for share. It's really important, and I think you agree, that we need to recognize the holisticness of the issues. It's not one issue alone that we need to address, and mental health is very important. But I want to just ask you another question that connects to that, and I see from your engagement here that you had to address things in a way maybe that you never had to do before. What leadership qualities did you see coming through for yourself or within your team? And what attributes do you think are most useful during a time of crisis?
So I think that during a time of crisis, this is where you can showcase your leadership ability. You can showcase again your ability of maintaining a certain calm in situation which could be quite dramatic, in being quite positive, trying to see the opportunities out of all the challenges which you meet. Being considerate and collaborative, I would say transparent and honest, going back to what I said into the beginning. So I think that into those time, people understand that it is challenging time. You do not need to give them unnecessary hopes which doesn't exist. You better show them the reality, but show them also the positiveness which is there. So the honesty, the clarity of your communication, I think, is quite important. But also you have to be extremely disciplined. So you need also a certain rigidity and sticking to your values, to your beliefs. I would say at every point in time where I had to face a situation, especially during this time, and there is different formulas. The first thing I said to myself, and I shared with some of the other business leaders, is let us be true to ourselves. What do we stand for? How do we stand for? What do we believe in? And this is for me the biggest catalyst. And this is why the engagement of being a responsible business, which I hope we are, is very important, because it triggers any decision which we have. And I think and I hope that leaders. Also, I would say of listening. So sometime again, we all feel, especially at the time like this, that we expect the leaders to know it all and to go with the solution. Honestly, we don't. So it's important that at the same time we listen and accept different point of view, but then we have to take the decision and take it in a very clear way and clairvoyant way, but have the ability of listening to our colleagues, to our peers, or to different, but at the end of it, take the decisions.
And I think these qualities that you mentioned for leadership are key during this time. And again, in the United Nations, we've actually developed a what we call a leadership model to ensure that we are able to support leadership development that has various aspects and attributes to it, including the ones that you indicated, as well as ensuring that there's integration across, inclusion, and other areas. So all very important to realize that the various aspects of leadership that we all studied in different ways really come to bear in a time of crisis. And we need to, I think I really liked your point on listening. We don't have all the answers. The answers are everywhere, and we need to be able to hone in to those answers. So that's also very, very key point that you raised. So thank you for that. And I
think to be humble enough to recognize that sometimes we haven't taken the right decision, and to have this speed of realizing it and rectifying it, and be honest about it. So really, it's not the time to be stubborn. And we can see it at government level, we can see it at the country level, that because we don't know where it is, and sometimes we are not sure of the results, and we have to have this humility of accepting to revise and to revisit our views if needed.
To learn from our mistakes, actually. Absolutely. And to accept that nothing is ever perfect.
So no unnecessarily egos to enter into the game.
Right. I think we've all seen and studied, for those of us who've studied different businesses and so on historically, have seen where when certain decision makers are rigid in their thinking and insist that their way is the only way, or they know the answer, that they can fall in a very bad trap. So it's really important for us to realize that when we are making a mistake, and learn how to shift quickly when we identify that. So that's a very important point in crisis. Otherwise, things will go really bad, I think.
but at the same time being decisive, I mean, and determined. So determined doesn't mean stubbornness, but also once we have the conviction after having listening, discussing, and seen that it's giving certain results, you cannot please it all. So you have to continue with determination.
You have to be able to adjust and make decisions and keep going, but you have to learn for when things aren't working. Right. But one of the things, and of course we've already touched on it in different ways, but I think it's a good one for us to also touch on, is how do you see what we're going through now impacting how businesses will be after the pandemic is under control? Do you think things will change, or will go back to the way things were before? What is your view at this time?
Because it's a discussion, and I will answer you. I will reiterate the same question for you, and again your view, individual, but also at the UN. I think first we have to understand that it's not something which will stop tomorrow morning. I think we have seen today that this pandemic will, and the return to a normality will take a certain time, will be graduals. We might have certain second wave, I hope not. We might have certain lockdown periods and reopening again, up till there is the medicine, vaccines, which will take it out of our ways, which can take months, years eventually. We are going to have to adapt and learn how to live with it for a certain time. So for me, this is a period undetermined, let's say 12, 18 months, perhaps less, perhaps more, but we need to be prepared to live with it, to go back to a certain normality in our life during this period where we will have masks when we go out, where we cannot touch and feel, where we will have social distancing going on. And I think for businesses, at least businesses like ours, it's a big change. We can say that people will go on e-com and not go to the physical shop. But even if they all go on e-com, what interests them, what motivates them if they are in confinement? How are we going to do with them? How are we going to have to be relevant during this 12, 18 months? Will be something which we need to acknowledge in a very agile way, and making sure at every time that we understand how our consumers are moving and thinking, what is relevant for them and how to adjust. But then hopefully there will be an end of it, and hopefully the soonest is the better. Will things come back like before? I don't believe at all, and I think I wouldn't even call it a new normality. I think it will be a new reality in life. Will people go back to the office and work in the office like before? Now that we have seen how much we could also produce and work at home, what does it mean in work ethics? How are we going to assess our people and their performance? Is it a number of hours or is it on assignment? So we really need to rethink, and this goes back to regulators, but it goes back to our UN Global Compact to think about, and it's part of the streams which we're thinking about the work ethics of the future, how we engage into it. And I think this is quite relevant. How the consumer will behave when now we felt what is important for us. Will we go back to a life where perhaps a lot of futility, or go back to a life where there is a lot more meaningful? Look at the atmosphere, at the air, how much we have worked, how much the Secretary General have worked for the climate change. I think that one of the things which we have seen is that, yes, we are able to control it. We do not need COVID-19 in order to control it. We should be able to control it. And I think that there is a strong awareness about it in moving to it. So we are going to live in a new reality, which again, I'm not able to assess all the aspects. We read a lot, we see it, but we can have also some reverse reaction of people who are fed up of the confinement, fed up of not socializing, and who will go back even into a different mood. But without doubt, we are going to live a new reality. So we need to prepare the next 12 and 18 months, and we need to prepare for after tomorrow. which will be a new reality, and taking some of the good learnings of the period which we have lived and really pushing it further. And I hope this is collective effort and individual effort, and also an effort from our business. So tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, before I get to my specific thoughts, want to say also to the group that's listening that here in the UAE, we have a UN Global Compact local network. So the UN Global Compact has local networks, meaning groups of companies that come together to discuss exactly the issues that Patrick has raised today. And I want to encourage everyone that's from the UAE, or if you're in a different country, to seek out in your country how to connect to that network, because I think this conversation that we're having today is something that we need to do amongst groups of people who are thinking about these issues. So I think really that's one thing. I think, Patrick, we can encourage our UAE colleagues to join us in a conversation beyond this webinar to discover and think, what is it that we've learned from this and how we're going to take it forward. But from the UN's point of view and my own personal point of view, I think I would agree with many of the things, of course, that you said, or all of the things actually that you said. But in addition, to say that we've actually learned a lot from this experience that has a way for us to reflect on what makes sense from an efficiency and effectiveness point of view for a business. And what we are seeing from the UN's point of view is there will be changes. And as you said, companies will be reevaluating what does it mean to do my business and how do I do my business. The 9 to 5 clock in, clock out is not the best measure of success or for employee performance. And we've known this for years, but we continued to do it because that's just how the world was. But now we have this opportunity to revisit. And I think that this is an opportunity, and that's why I wanted to mention the local network, because it is through this short conversation that we will come to these conclusions, but through the engagement in various groups where like-minded people come together to discuss and share what, like you're doing today, what worked for them, what didn't work, how can we re-engage, and then even at the policy level, these things can be addressed, not company by company, maybe even in government policies. So there's a variety of things that we can do together, and this is where I really stress the point also of multilateralism. This isn't a one company thing. This isn't a one country issue. This is really a global issue. And countries around the world now, I think, also are realizing the importance of engagement together and supporting one another. Because if one country or one population even within your country is suffering, all of us suffer. So we have to consider the principle of the UN's leave no one behind. It's key. I do think, Patrick, we might have some questions that we want to entertain before the end of the webinar. So maybe we switch and see with Yasmin if there's some questions that we might want to take on.
Yeah. So we have got a few questions. The theme seems to be around the same thing, in the sense that there's a lot wanting to know more about the e-commerce aspect of your operations. Before I start asking questions, they're all they're all introduced with the context of congratulating you on the initiatives taken and the actions that have been taken by Chalhoub Group. So congratulations, and to the questions now. So one of the, as I mentioned, is e-commerce. So someone's asking, how sustainable do you believe?
Sorry, we lost you.
I think we lost her sound, but I think we know the question, Patrick. So okay. The question is around e-commerce. So maybe you can speak to how you're addressing e-commerce in the Chalhoub Group.
Okay, so I'll go quite briefly, but so we started our e-com drive 5 years ago. We started, again, we are mainly in the brick and mortars, and I would say we started with a certain slowness in order to engage. And last year, 3.5% of our business were done on e-com through different e-sites which we had. Our ambition is to be, I would say, everywhere where the customer wants us, everywhere and anywhere, and definitely quite hybrid, so wherever the customer wants, e-com or on the physical stores. Our objective was to say, when can we reach 10–15% of our business in e-com, and how are we organizing ourselves to do it? So in a space of 1 month, we have been able to put together 15 e-com sites. What used to take us a year, 2 years, thanks to the ingenuity of our people and their willingness. Some are pop-up and quick fix, but 15 new e-com sites. In a period of 4 weeks, we have been able to multiply our sales by 6. So reaching, if our turnover were the same than before, 20%, which is higher of our expectation 5 years from now or even more. Now, we have a lot of challenges which we had to meet. First
I was
of
just
all,
about to ask you about your challenges. Go
of course,
ahead.
it's a question. It's not to flatter what you have done. So the first one, I would say, to have the talented people who have the knowledge, because again, the e-com drive is happening everywhere and anywhere, and those talented people and the people who are knowledgeable about it are, even if we are trying to spread it out to all our teams, are quite valuable, and there is a necessity of having more of those talented people, performance marketeers, supply chain specialists, in order to be able to fulfill it. Quite a lot of it, but a lot of the other jobs, we need to reconvert our teams on how they can handle our customer service, and they could do it even if they are in after. So a lot of e-learnings to reconvert our teams, a lot of talents which are there. Supply chain has been really a big issue. A big issue because, again, we were not prepared to multiply our sales by 6, but I think it's a general issue when it comes to the last miles, to the deliveries. I think that we were all overwhelmed about what was happening, and we need to structure it in a better way, and this is here to stay. So we need structural elements in order to be able to move it and to make it happen. And also, how are we going to delight our customer? Because we are in selling luxury, and we are into all about storytelling, all about emotions. So how are we going to do it through the digital side? And again, a lot of ingenuity have been put together in order to find certain solutions, and I think it will go even better, but a lot of challenges to be doing it. So I think we are into the infancy, and when we said our aim is 20%, perhaps the aim will be 50, 60%, but we don't care. We need really to be hybrid. I hope it answered the question. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Yasmin is back with us, but as a follow-up, even though, if you don't mind, Yasmin, I think one of the areas too I'm curious about is perhaps marketing. And in a country like the UAE, I'm not really sure how much e-commerce was really part of the way people purchased. How do we change the culture? And is this something that you faced, and how did you address it?
I mean, definitely COVID-19 have changed the habits. One of our challenges was a lot of people do not trust, so they want to pay cash on delivery, which is one of the only parts of the world in the Middle East where we have it. Now people do not want to touch currency. They prefer to pay by credit card just by safety measures. So that happened. And the same thing, a lot of people want to have the feeling, the social contact, etc. Now we are in social distancing, so we don't have this feeling and in this emotion. But definitely, what I could say to answer your question is, how can we stay connected and engaged with our customer digitally, as we are doing here together, or if we meet in person? How are we going to be able to continue a conversation, to say a story, even if it is through the... And by finding those solutions, we have been able to engage our customer to transact through the e-com and digitally. And this is why I say it's here to stay, because those solutions will only go increasingly. Virtual reality, videos, inspirational videos, so quite a lot of different tools which we could do, and often cheap to implement, not very costly to do. It requires creativity, innovative ways.
Right, and all of these things require honed in leadership skills, because you're not going to be able to innovate and do all these new things without the right leadership skills. So I think this again ties back to the issue of corporate leadership. But Yasmin, are there any other key questions for us? We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. No.
No, can't hear. Okay, we'll give it a half a second. I'm sure, Patrick, we have many things also to talk about. Well, while Yasmin sees what other questions are out there. And I think we can also stress further, I think for the group that's listening, the element of innovation and resilience. I think, you know, companies have realized that they have to have a sustainable and strategic contingency plan. They can't manage their business, you know, in a way that's not resilient, to find themselves in crisis. Is this something that the Chalhoub Group is looking at differently now? How are you ensuring that you have greater resilience in your business plans in the future? Is there something you can share with the group?
What I could share is a drive which we had started, but which is accelerating. How can you expect the unexpected? The only way is agility, speed, empowerment. So being able to give the responsibility and empower the people to take the best possible decision in order to face certain challenge and a certain situation. We have people who are in 14 countries, in different cities. Even if we can reach them, etc., the decision we can take, I'm based in Dubai and headquartered in Dubai, the decision I can take or my executive committee could take could be irrelevant for them. So the best possible way to answer it is really to make sure that you empower your people and you make sure that you trust them to have the best possible judgment. And then we go back to the principle and to the values. You have a strong culture, you have a strong DNA. So what would guide you is really those attachment to your culture, to your DNA, to the way you think, in order to make sure that you accomplish all your objectives. So yes, we need better planification, better preparation, business continuity plan, and we had green, yellow, orange, red, etc. But none of them has worked today. But so this is, I would say, the response I could give.
No, that's very helpful. And I want to stress again some of the words that you're using, because I think these are the captures we need to take away. You said the word trust and trust in decision-making of your employees. This is a very important, I think, leadership skill that we need to emphasize as well to the group, that you repeated a few times when you were speaking. If we don't trust those that we are working and also build up their skills and repurpose them to be more flexible in different ways, again, as you've mentioned, they're not going to be able to be agile, as you also said is really critical, flexible, innovative, and so on. So these are also additional attributes, I think, that we can share that we've learned from, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, this notion of trusting and empowering, but also accepting that some people will make certain mistakes. And if they make the mistake, again, as we were speaking for the leader, that they recognize them and they move forward, and that we don't start a blaming situation, but more mainly cooperation and trying to get out the best learning of it and moving forward. But
so
again,
to be collaborative and not so risk averse, because otherwise we can't be innovative, right?
Absolutely. And again, innovation is something which I think Yasmin is on.
No, she's not back. Oh, are you there, Yasmin?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm going to refrain from putting the video on. Sorry, there seems to be some connection issues here. Sorry about this.
Okay.
We jinxed our technical capabilities. Okay, the next question is actually about a new normal. So I know you've mentioned that, Patrick, you don't think there's going to be a new normal, but people think, some questions have been that there is a new norm, that what does this actually mean? Because to an extent, can we have a new normal after this? And do you think it is even an option? Are we people over-exaggerating?
No, for me, there will be a new normal. I just changed the term. I said it will be a new reality. I think that we are going to live in a different world where things will definitely change, because people will change the way they would appreciate, the way they would consume, the way what they feel is important and meaningful. I think that the new reality could be much better than the old reality, because I think that the people now appreciate more what is important for them and their life. I think that people today value the connection and the relation they have. It's not about anything and everything. I think that, again, we are going, unfortunately, to live in a period where economically it will be more difficult. And because economically will be more difficult for months, years perhaps, people will have to come up with a different appreciation of their life. I mean, if I go back only to my activity and my we are into the beauty industry or in the fashion industry, so makeup was extremely important, perfume was extremely important. Today it's skincare. People are looking on their wellness. They are looking on their inside beauty and outside reflection, taking care of their person more than taking care of what other will look at it. We are into the fashion business. I think that if people work on home, the way they will dress up is totally different than the way if they go back every day to the office and they will be in a more casual wear, a different way of doing it. Just to speak about e-com, we have seen it. If it's convenient to go on digitally, people will go digitally. So I think there is a lot of new things which will happen. Traveling, I mean, we will appreciate traveling much more, but it will not be the fury of traveling. We could stay in the UAE, enjoy our time within the UAE, make a staycation instead of having to travel the world in order to find things which are closer to our home and important. And this is definitely a reality which we are going to live.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right, and one last question before we close. So just we've got a few more, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to have to close it. So one final question. The last few months have seen a reevaluation of essential jobs, with certain jobs gaining essential status. This demonstrates that the private sector needs to reimagine its structure as a whole when it comes to human resource management and employee protections. How do you envision this happening in the Middle East?
I mean, again, perhaps what I will answer will not please everyone, but I would say, as being also part of the board of the UN Global Compact, the global board, it's a thinking which we are having about what we call the new social contract. So I think that even before COVID, this era where we have very strict labor laws and very strict working environment, we need more flexibility into doing it, and from all sides. I think that today, and again, in some of my activities, we had we have like 200 freelancers working for it. And you know what? They don't want to get a full employment. They didn't want to get a full employment. They want to remain freelancer, and often they are much more innovative and creative than our work. So I think that from an employee or employer point of view, we really need to rethink about what I would call this new social contract of how we could protect employees, people, population, perhaps have a basic salary for all the population which exists, and then you have some extra if you do some assignment or jobs. But I think that there should be, and perhaps Dena, you could take us also of your thinking, there should be a more agile and flexible way for all parties in order to foster creativity, innovation, progress, development, rather than being very contingent with very strict laws which sometimes are defying the purpose.
If I may, Yasmin, just to say here, of course, we're towards the end of our time. We've said throughout the webinar that there will be many reflections and realizations as all of humanity is going through a common experience. And this will have impacts on many things across the planet, policies at the government level, as well as in the private sector and how they do their business. As the United Nations will be working with countries to see how to capture and how to see what are the best of what countries are able to determine. And so I'm looking forward actually on a professional level and personal level to how we will evolve and learn as humanity from this experience. We've learned that we can't ignore many things, and I haven't mentioned one of the key principles of the UN, which is we're working on, which is many of you would know, the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN was pushing and trying to advocate very strongly to the planet that we have different areas that we must reach and do different targets in different areas of development. This was pre-COVID. The COVID situation has now re-emphasized that had we reached our targets, we wouldn't be in as bad a situation as now. And we cannot ignore the Sustainable Development Goals and the targets that the world has put for us to reach a basic humanity. And there's a variety of things now that will come out of this experience that will even take this even further. And I do want to just say also to everyone who's listening, this year is the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And because it's our 75th anniversary, it'll be in October. The anniversary of the UN is on October 24th every year. The 75th anniversary of our founding, we are doing a reach out to the planet. And this we had started prior to the pandemic, and now it even is more relevant to ask the planet, what is the world that we want? And there's a survey, you can go online, just type in UN 75 survey, you'll find it. We'll also send the link with the follow-up materials for this webinar, and share your point of view on what world we want. Here in the UAE, they're planning on the next 50 years. They're having their 50th anniversary next year, as everyone knows. And they're planning to they were planning before the COVID hit us to have this year as their year of planning to look to a vision of the future. So my question is to all of us, what have we learned from this experience, and how do we see the vision of our future, whether we are a private sector business, or we're working in a government, or how we even manage our families? Many things have come to bear and are being brought to our attention as humanity. And I actually look forward to see how we learn from this experience in a positive way. So this would be my final remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dena. Mr. Patrick Chalhoub, would you like to leave us with some words of wisdom and some final closing remarks?
I mean, again, I agree with everything you said, Dena, and I think it's very important to reflect and assess what you have said. My final remark is very simple. Really, if we could be responsible businesses, and this is why I invite you also to be part of the Global Compact Network, because if you can be responsible businesses, this is the best way to go through good and challenging times. This is the best way to make the best adequate decisions in every terms, respecting all the stakeholders, as you asked me, Dena, if you are running responsibly your business and not running it in a very inclusive way and a very egoist way into doing it, but still running well your business. Thank you. I hope.
I think that's very good advice.
Thank you. Thank you, Dena. Thank you.
Thank you all. Just on behalf of everyone at the Pearl Initiative and the participants today, the feedback has been a resounding thank you for your honesty, your frankness and your openness and your humility, and being such a leader in the initiatives that you're taking and sharing those with the rest of us. It is refreshing to see the initiatives being taken by businesses on the ground and the responses of the private sector, and it's reassuring to know that they're stepping up to the mark to support, the socio-economic environment in these trying times. So, yeah, I would like to thank Chalhoub Group on such forthcoming and proactive initiatives in response to the pandemic, and I'm sure others have learned significantly from today. Dr. Dena, thank you so much for facilitating the conversation and sharing more information about the UN. And as we build our webinar series, we hope to showcase some more best practices across the region, so we know that the businesses aren't alone, and in the kind of spirit of the UN Global Compact, we can all support each other and learn from each other as well. So thank you very much. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to wish everyone a blessed Eid al-Fitr. It's obviously coming up next week, and take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.